Alright guys, so we'll give everybody a couple more minutes to get in here and then we will get started. For those of you guys just joining, gonna give people about another minute to filter in, and then I'll get started. I'll start explaining the purpose of this stream tonight and the agenda. All right, so let's get this thing started. So, for those who don't know, I've been beta testing Long Island Railroad for the past, I don't know, 5 weeks or so. It's been a long road. A lot of fixes. Can't get into any details regarding that, but there's still some issues that still haven't been resolved. The ones that I want to cover mostly tonight are in regard to signals. So a lot of signal fixes made their way into the release version. Still some things that need to be worked out. A lot of people are confused as to how the signals work in Long Island Railroad, and I think that was going to be the case even if DTG got the signals 100% correct. So without further ado, let's dive in. I've got 3 things lined up for tonight. First one is the 407 service from Port Washington to New York Penn Station. So obviously we don't have Port Washington in the route, but we're going to be doing the portion of the route from Woodside to Penn Station. Alright, so it looks like the train's already set up and ready to go. We don't have to board passengers or anything. Just gonna get the train ready. Master key, reverser, headlights to bright, brake to max brake. And charge. Finally, automatic train control and alerter. So we start out with a 70 lamp on the platform here. Looks like we are ready to depart. So at this point, I'm operating strictly under the assumption that I'm allowed to go 70 miles per hour. But because I'm an engineer qualified in this territory, theoretically in the game, I'm not actually in real life qualified in this territory, but as I'm operating under the guise of an engineer qualified in this territory, I know that I'm not allowed to go any more than, I believe, 60 on this section of track. And the heads-up display reflects that. So we're passing a approach medium pedestal type signal, and it's downgrading our cab signals to 60. That is a legal speed for approach medium on Long Island Railroad. Approach medium in this case with a cab speed of 60 is mostly going to be used as a slowdown signal. Like you got something coming up, slow down to this speed to prepare for it. It turns out that the speed of Harold interlocking up ahead is 60, unless you're switching tracks, so that seems to be what it's preparing us for. So we got a clear signal at Harold interlocking. Continuing west toward Penn Station. We're in Harold interlocking as we speak. Got another clear signal coming up at Harold. Maximum authorized speed of 60, still not changing tracks, nothing abnormal here. Another clear signal at Harold. So now I've got an approach medium. Still didn't downgrade the cabs at all. We're still authorized to go 60. So So that was the distance signal for F interlocking. Now we're approaching F interlocking. We've got another approach medium. Still, cabs are 60, and that's fine. There's really nothing abnormal there. So now we're coming up on the entrance to the East River tunnels. Now we have an approach signal. Cabs get downgraded to 40 in this particular case. 3 possible speeds for an approach signal: 40, 30, and 15. We happen to get the most favorable of the 3. Let me turn the wipers off. So now I'm proceeding under the assumption that the next signal is going to be a stop signal. Fortunately, the next signal in these tunnels is not an interlocking signal, so its most restrictive aspect is going to be stop and proceed. And now we're getting upgraded to a clear signal. So the cabs just upgraded to 60. Can I immediately start accelerating to 60? No. You need to let the train run its complete length before you're allowed to accelerate. And I'm just about at that point now. So we're currently underneath the East River on our way to Manhattan, and as we approach Penn Station, we, in real life, would expect to see our signals get downgraded from a clear progressively. You're not just going to keep getting clear signals in real life like you do in the game. So right around here, you get an approach limited signal, which forces you to go down to 40. So I'm going to simulate that now. Let's just go with this signal right here. Great. So now we're going to, well, first we're going to acknowledge that approach signal. And then the next signal after that approach limited in real life is an approach slow. So approach slow means to proceed approaching the next signal at slow speed, which in this case is going to be 15 miles an hour. And you have to start slowing down to 30 miles an hour immediately. But I didn't do it fast enough, but I'm good. In real life, that signal progression is there from approach limited down to approach slow, and then you reach that signal that I just passed on the way into Penn Station. So by the time you reach that point that I just passed, you're already going 15 miles an hour based on the signals. You don't have to remember, hey, I have the 15 mile an hour limit coming up in half a mile. The signals will bring you down gradually to the required speed of the station. So, as I said, you're starting out at 60, clear signal. You hit approach limited, down to 40. Then you hit approach slow. You're down to 30 and slowing down to 15 before you reach the next signal. The next signal will enforce 15 miles per hour like we now see on our cabs. And that should not have happened. All the signals in Penn Station should drop the cabs to 15. You should not get them upgraded to 60, ever. So that's another thing that needs to be fixed. People are playing the game thinking, hey, is this my speed limit? No, that is not your speed limit. This is simply a representation of signal speeds. That is not necessarily the track speed. The line speed, as some people like to call it. Alright, so that was the little introductory service. Now we're going to do something a little bit longer. So this service is the 2018 service from New York Penn Station to Ronkonkoma, but in this route, the only section represented is New York Penn to Hicksville. So it's mostly an express service. We're going to do New York Penn to Jamaica, and then Jamaica to Hicksville, I believe. So as we're boarding passengers, let's get this train set up. Alright, nice, we're good. Got everything ready to go, got automatic train control enforced, alerter on. Just gotta wait another 40 seconds before we can depart. So in that time, I'm gonna take a drink. Got some vodka with me. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody, by the way. I hope you had a great time with your family, if you did celebrate Thanksgiving this year. Alright, let's lock these doors and make our way through the East River tunnels. I find it kind of funny how that signal's placed. It's kind of protruding through the overhead light. Minor little cosmetic glitch. So all these signals are clear signals, but the exception in Penn Station is that all signals, regardless of signal aspect, will enforce 15 miles an hour in the cab. So if you were watching for the last service, you saw that one of the clear signals in Penn Station upgraded my cabs to 60. That should not happen. It should always be 15. So far, we're doing fine. This signal's the exception. This is the tunnel entrance signal. The tunnel entrance signal should allow us to go faster, which it did properly. So we're lined up to do a eastward move through East River Tunnel line number 4, operating under a clear signal aspect, waiting for our entire consist to clear the interlocking before we are allowed to proceed at 60 miles per hour. Which should be right about now. So there's one thing coming up that I want to warn you guys about. I don't want it to come up all of a sudden and you having to be like, whoa, what just happened? So, up ahead at the other end of the tunnel at F interlocking, they're going to have us switch tracks from line 4 to line 2. That's a 45-mile-an-hour crossover. The signals all the way up to and including the interlocking are going to be all clear signals. For a diverging movement at 45 miles an hour, shouldn't be the case. So, I'll explain how the signal should progress. Beforehand, well, the signal before the interlocking home signal should display approach limited to slow us down to 40 miles an hour, limited speed for Long Island Railroad, before we reach the interlocking. The signal after that should display limited clear, which means to remain at 40 miles an hour all the way through the interlocking. It doesn't do that. So right now you're allowed to just blow through that switch at 60 miles an hour. You're not going to derail or anything, but it's not going to be a comfortable ride for your passengers, not even close. So just watch out for that. I'm gonna follow what the game says for this one. But for most other things, I'm going to slow down to what you should be doing, and I'll let you know about what I'm doing. So we're getting pretty close to that switch. I'm thinking that signal that we just passed right there was going to be the one that should display approach limited. So right now, theoretically, we should have gotten 40 on the cabs, and we should be braking to 40 to be going 40 by the time we reach F interlocking. Make sense? So we've got the interlocking coming up here, and you're going to see that switch that we're going to be using to go over to line number 2 right here. Now, it didn't look that bad, but it would have been a little bit rough. Alright, so we've got another clear signal here at the distance signal for Harold. Fine. Go 60. Still staying at 60 on the cabs. So at Harold we have clear signal. Fine. Clear in Harold just means go 60, basically. Alright, so now we're coming up to approach medium. Let's see if this downgrades our cabs at all. It did not downgrade our cabs at all. We're still at 60. But it should have. Look at the next signal. Medium clear. Oh, let's see what happens here. Pay close attention to the heads-up display. So passing that medium clear is enforcing 40 miles an hour on the cab. But now look at the heads-up display. 30 miles an hour. So even if I was following the speed limits and did slow down to 40 beforehand, like the cab signals indicated, I would still be going 40 miles an hour going into that switch. But the speed limit of that switch, according to the game, was 30. So how can the cab signals tell you to slow down to 40, which is a valid speed for passing a medium clear in Long Island Railroad territory? How can they give you 40 and then expect you to be going 30 by the time you hit the switch? The reason is Dovetail Games gave you the wrong signal speed the entire time. When you hit that approach medium signal back there, instead of staying at 60, it should have popped you down to 30. So you'd be going 30 by the time you pass that medium clear signal. And then you'd be going through that switch at 30 miles an hour. That's the way it should have been done. It shouldn't be 60 at the approach medium, then 40 at the medium clear, and then speeding through the switch. No, you get 30, then 30, then you switch. Gives you plenty of time to slow down, plenty of time to be compliant, and switch safely. But anyway, now we're at Woodside, and we have 60 in the cabs, and we are allowed to go 60 now. So that's fine. We're operating under a clear signal still. You're going to see another example of this happening up here as we approach Jamaica. There's going to be a signal before Jamaica, well, before J interlocking anyway, that should be displaying approach medium and enforcing 30 in the cab. It doesn't do that. It's strictly a clear signal, and it will still keep you at 80 in the cab. So you're approaching J interlocking going way too fast. The signal progressions there are very, very strict and very, very predictable. In most cases, they're exactly the same. In most cases, they're the same, like I said. Approach medium, 30, going around 30 by the time you hit the interlocking. And then you slow down to 15 as you go into Jamaica. It's not the way it is in the game, and I'll show you. So right here is fine. We're allowed to go 80 here, just fine, on our approach to Forest Hills, Kew Gardens. No problem. 80 is just fine. One thing I do want to point out, though, if you do have this next signal indicator on that tells you the distance to the next signal and the aspect of the next signal, you might notice that it kind of behaves the same way as New Haven to New York, or New York to New Haven in Train Sim 2014 and beyond. So one of the things that I had to work out with the developers was that you don't just have the fixed wayside signals in Long Island Railroad. You have code change points, and it's these same kind of signals, but they're just invisible. They work the same, they're just in the track, and it's all the same equipment as the wayside signal, just without the wayside signal. Think of it that way. And those define the signal blocks. The developers found that when they had just included the wayside signals that you see, that there wasn't enough space for all the trains to operate. And I said, well, you got to include the code change points, the block points, all these signals in between these fixed signals that you see like we're coming up to. And once they started adding those invisible, I call them invisible signals because that's how everybody best understands them. Once they start adding those invisible signals, they're like, yeah, the services are working a lot better now. So they went with it. You'll see we're coming up to one of those invisible signals right now. We just passed one. You didn't even notice it, but that signal, that code change point, has the potential to downgrade your cab signals in response to a more restrictive wayside signal up ahead. Make sense? So we're coming up to Kew Gardens, and this is one of the signals that I said should be approach medium. We just passed it. It's a clear signal. That signal should be approach medium, and we should have already been slowing down well in advance of this station as we approach J interlocking. So I'm slowing down now. Even though the game says not to, that's the thing. Look, the cab signal indicator still says 80. It still says 80. But way back there, way even before Kew Gardens, we should have gotten a code change point to downgrade our cabs to maybe something like 60 or 40, something like that. And then hitting that approach medium signal should have downgraded them to 30. And then look, here at J, we got a medium clear again. And that should downgrade, that should keep them at 30. They shouldn't even be at 40 right now. They should be at 30 for that switching movement. That's a 30-mile-an-hour crossover. Yet the game gives us 40. There's no forewarning of that switch at all. You got a clear signal going into a medium clear that doesn't happen. You have forewarning in real life that you got a medium clear signal coming up. And it's just not represented in the game. I think that's part of the confusion. So anyway, medium clear signal. We switched tracks. We're continuing through J interlocking. We're reaching the next signal bridge. Now, this next signal bridge in real life should pretty much always display approach slow. Now, approach slow, like I described in the last service, means to proceed approaching the next signal at slow speed. And if you're going over 30, to start slowing down to 30. Right here we have a clear signal. No, that shouldn't be the case. We should be prepared to reach that next signal bridge and be going no more than 15 miles an hour. And that signal right there shouldn't be displaying approach. Well, it's currently displaying approach and some other stuff on the bottom head. That bottom head shouldn't even be illuminated at all. But in any case, that signal right there should be displaying slow approach. Now, slow approach, for those of you unfamiliar with the signals, slow approach means proceed prepared to stop at the next signal. Slow speed within interlocking limits. Now, in this particular interlocking, J interlocking, this portion of the interlocking is only going to be 15 miles an hour. So the slow speed they're talking about is 15 miles an hour. So be prepared to stop at the next signal and 15 miles an hour through the interlocking. It's pretty straightforward. And that's what the signal should have displayed back there, but it didn't. This right here, right now, should be saying 15, not 40. And the speed limit shouldn't be 35. It should be 15. And in my little diatribe, I overspeeded. Sorry, lost focus there for a second. So anyway, we're coming into Jamaica right now. This next signal, the little dwarf signal down there, is displaying slow approach, which is what that previous signal should have been displaying. That's going to downgrade us to 15 guaranteed. And it does. And now we've got a stop signal right here at Hall interlocking. So, yeah, there's a lot of confusion with how to interpret the cab signal indicator. But there's also a lot of bad signaling. And Dovetail Games is to blame with that. You can't go from a clear signal at 80 miles an hour straight into a medium clear signal, which is going to enforce 30, and you're switching tracks at 30 miles an hour. You just don't do that. That's how you derail trains. And that's a non-functional signal system. You have these code change points, these invisible signal points in between fixed signals. Just to put into perspective for you guys what I mean by a fixed signal. That's a fixed signal. You can see it on the side of the track. It's displaying an aspect. We continue down here, just because we're going to be waiting a couple minutes for passengers to board. We were a little bit early. Right here at the Meat House Bridge, you got these three signals. These are wayside signals. All three of them are currently displaying stop aspects. You continue down here to the 98-99 signal bridge. You got all of these. These are wayside signals. All displaying stop, by the way. But besides from these wayside signals that you see all the time, you have these invisible signals. They are just in the track. It's got all the same circuitry, all the same equipment that controls these types of signals, except you don't see the signal at the wayside. It's a signal. You just don't physically see what it's conveying. You got all of those, and they're not working properly yet. They should be slowing your speed down far in advance, and it's just not working right yet. I know it's kind of hard to explain, and I am probably not the best at explaining it. But we're going to continue toward Hicksville. We're going to continue toward Hicksville, and hopefully it becomes a lot more clear. And I'm leaving that next signal indicator at the top right hand of the screen on for that very reason, so you can see where these invisible signals are. So right now at Hall Interlocking, we're passing a slow clear. Those little dwarf signals at on the track, the little baby signals, those dwarf signals, the best signal that they can possibly display is slow clear. Now, slow clear means to proceed at slow speed within the interlocking limits. That's all that it means. Slow speed in this case means 15. Alright, so now we're gonna go by a slow approach signal. Slow approach, proceed prepared to stop at the next signal, slow speed within interlocking limits. So I'm looking ahead, and that next signal is not a stop signal. That is a restricting signal. Restricting is a little bit different. It's not something that I've encountered all too much in this route. Restricting has a bunch of rules tied to it, but you have to stop short within 1/2 the range of vision short of broken rail, misaligned track, trains occupying the track, and stuff like that, and not exceeding 15 miles an hour. So if I was an engineer in real life and I got a restricting signal, I'd be looking out for these switches being misaligned, which they're not. They're going to take me over to this track over here, to the left. I don't see any broken rail. I don't see any trains occupying the track ahead. Everything looks fine. Everything looks normal. But at restricted speed, those are things you're supposed to look out for. So that's why I'm being vigilant. Just being vigilant and looking out for those things. Alright, so now we have a clear signal at the 98-99 signal bridge. So my cabs just got upgraded to 60. As you can see in the heads-up display on the bottom right. Can I immediately start increasing my speed to 60? No. You have to let the train run its length, like I previously explained. By running its length, that means just that. From where I got the speed increase, you can't increase your speed to that new speed until the entire train has passed. So I'm at the back of the train right now. I went to the number 3 camera, and I'm at where I got that speed increase. Now I can increase to 60. Make sense? So I just gotta bump to 80. I can't increase from 60 to 80 until my entire train reaches where I got upgraded to 80. Got another clear signal here at Hall. This speed limit coming up at the Hillside Viaduct was originally 60 during testing, but then at the last minute it got changed to 80. This curve right here, as it should be, used to be 60 in the game. At release, I don't know, just got bumped up to 80. Got no idea why. But you should be going 60 through that Hillside Viaduct curve, the reverse curve there. But we're all good now. Now we can accelerate to 80 miles an hour. And we're express now, all the way to Hicksville. It's, I believe, pretty much 80 miles an hour until we get close to Hicksville, where it downgrades to 40 miles an hour as we get close to the platform. And all of that is accurate, I think, in the game. There might be a brief little bit in Queens Interlocking where the game thinks it should be 60 miles an hour, but it's not. It should be 80. But we'll see. I might be misremembering. So keep an eye on that next signal indicator at the top right. See how it's counting down 100 yards. And boom, we just passed it. That's one of those invisible signals I'm talking about. Most train engineers aren't going to be aware of that signal being there unless they're familiar with the engineering and communications side of things. But be aware that those are signals, and they can downgrade what you see on your cab signal indicator. That's actually their design. So as we're just cruising along here, I think we still got a good string of clear signals. Actually, damn, we got something coming up. No, never mind, it just flipped. So we're good. So as we continue down the track, I'm gonna get another shot of this vodka. I think we're doing pretty good. Actually, we're just passing an approach medium signal here at Queens. But it's keeping us at 80, and that's allowed. Those of you with an Amtrak background like I do will look at passing an approach medium signal and be like, yeah, that's a problem. Ah, shit, we got a approach signal. See, that shouldn't have happened either. Right there. An approach medium at 80, and then you hit an approach, and then you immediately just get forced onto another track. That just doesn't happen like that. That's not a progression, a signal progression that you're going to get when switching tracks. It's just not going to happen like that. In a case like that, where you're switching tracks, I don't know the switching speed there. It looked to be more than 40. It could have been something like 60. You could have kept the signal clear and just downgraded it to 60 and then had the train switch tracks. That actually is something that does happen at this interlocking quite frequently. The track speed ends up being equal to the speed that the trains switch tracks, so they just keep a clear signal aspect and then just end up downgrading the signal on the cab accordingly. I did see a video of it recently, and I'm like, wow, I'm surprised that a train was switching tracks on a clear signal. And somebody else in the comments mentioned the same thing, and the guy said, yeah, so the speed of the track during normal operations is the same as the track switching speed, so they just keep the signal the same. And that's something that is a little bit different than how Amtrak operates things, so I'm like, yeah, it's different, but I can kind of understand it. Anyway, now that I think we're good, back to that vodka shot. Another thing is we've got a lot of crossings coming up, and One of the things I criticized during development was no whistle signs. There's no whistle signs at all. You don't know that a crossing's coming up, like, oh, here we go. There's a crossing, but hell, did you know? No, there's no whistle boards. And you can't expect everybody to memorize. You can't expect everybody to memorize where all of the crossings are. That's why you have whistle boards. Even at nighttime, you have those reflectorized whistle boards. Alright, so now we're passing an approach signal. We're gonna get bumped down to 40 again. So, I find that kind of weird. And this happens randomly in this game. You'll be going along just fine, happy as a clam, clear 80, and then you'll just hit this random approach signal, and it'll bump you down to 40. Never fails. Game will always interpret an approach signal as a 40. Well, sometimes it'll do it as a 15, but whatever. So you'll be going along happy as a clam, clear 80, hit this approach signal, go down to 40, and then you'll hit a clear signal again and get bumped right back up to 80. I mean, I've heard of cab signal flips, but that's ridiculous. Anyway, we slow down to 40, we waited for the train to get something greater, we let the train clear that signal, and then we're upgrading to 80 again. Just passed an approach medium, it's allowing 80. That's one thing that I'm criticizing about this game. Approach medium doesn't always mean 80. Actually, it rarely ever should mean 80 in real life. Yes, it can show 80 in rare circumstances where the next signal is very far away and is going to show something potentially slower. But in my experience thus far, approach medium sorry, I felt obligated to blow the horn there. But in my experience thus far, approach medium has just kept the cabs at 80, and it's not really the purpose of it. It can display a lot of speeds, I'm telling you. Approach medium is a very versatile signal. When it comes to the Long Island Railroad anyway, very versatile. But it primarily should be used when preparing for a slowdown or enforcing a slowdown. It shouldn't be used the way they're using it. They're using it just like a clear signal. If it's going to always just be 80 miles an hour, then just keep it a clear signal. Don't just give us this random approach medium out of the blue. But anyway, I digress. But I guess that's the purpose of this this stream. ATC does work surprisingly well, though. I gotta tell you. It's not exactly realistic. Like, in real life, you're allowed to go 82 miles an hour in an 80 mile an hour zone before ATC starts kicking in, because it kind of compensates for irregularities in the speedometer. But in the game, it's assuming a perfect speedometer, which is fine. And as soon as you go over 80, you hit 81, it starts bitching at you. And that's totally fine. But it works very well. It will It will slow you down if you are going too fast. There we go. And you got to acknowledge it every time. You can't just start slowing down and have it stop chirping at you. You do need to acknowledge it as well. So, we got about 2.5 miles before we get into Hicksville. After this service, I'm going to do one of the scenarios, one of the 5 scenarios that got released with the route. And it's one of my favorite scenarios. It's one of the ones I frequently tested during beta testing. Kings and Queens. So, before I was testing the route, I didn't really have much knowledge about Long Island Railroad or Atlantic Branch or Atlantic Terminal at all. I've heard of them. I had looked over some crash documents when a train last year oversped through the area and ran into the bumper block. Ah, shit. Medium clear. Are you kidding me? See, this is exactly what I mean. Did you see how we just switched tracks there? We were running under clear signals the entire time. We didn't have a single approach medium or anything. We had clear signals the entire time. And then we suddenly get hit with this medium clear signal. That does not happen. That should not happen. We should have had an approach medium signal way out there that threw our cabs down to 30. Because that looked to be, at least according to my eyes, a 30-mile-an-hour switch, maybe a 40. So 30 or 40 I would have been fine with. Approach medium signal way out there beforehand should have thrown the cabs down to 30 or 40. We brake, comply, hit the medium clear, switch at the allowed speed, and move on. Not this one. We have a clear signal, 80, and then just get thrown right into this medium clear signal, and it throws our cabs into 40, and we immediately switch tracks. Passengers are getting thrown into the windows. I mean, that's just par for the course, and it happens all the time. We saw it. We've been seeing it all night. And you guys will see it all the time. You get these clear signals, and you just get thrown into these diverging signals, like medium clear, limited clear, all that stuff. And it's just not right. You got to have a preparatory signal to slow you down before you have that signal of execution, which switches tracks. But anyway, back to Atlantic Terminal. Back when I was testing it, I became pretty fond of the Atlantic branch. And that's what we're going to be testing next. Just past an approach signal at Divide, and we're coming into Hicksville. Approach signal is appropriate for this situation because, as we can see at the top right with the next signal indicator, next signal is a stop signal, so an approach signal is appropriate. And as we get closer to that stop signal, the cabs, as they do, or as they should, do get downgraded to 15, which is proper design. I was actually very surprised when I first saw that during testing, that they did downgrade to 15 before a stop signal. Because that's the way it actually happens in real life, even on Amtrak. It's designed that way. So Steve J is asking me, how can someone become a beta tester? So I applied to become one. Well, I requested to become one. Just emails to Dovetail Games saying, hey, I've been doing this, this, and this. I have this knowledge that I think I can contribute, blah, blah, blah. I did that 3 times. I sent them an email. And they said, oh, we're not looking for anybody right now. We're not looking for anybody right now, blah, 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 etc. So I petitioned 3 times to be on the beta testing team, and to no avail. I knew I could be an asset. And then Northeast Corridor, New York, got announced. And I'm like, God damn, if I was on that team right now, I could be of such help. So, whatever. The route comes out, Northeast Corridor, New York, and that was back in March. Route comes out, and I start testing the route, and I'm critiquing the shit out of this route. Signals, speeds, safety systems on the locomotive, etc., etc., etc. So Matt Pedalson, the senior producer on for Dovetail Games, reaches out to me with a bunch of questions about signals and safety systems and stuff like that. So we're hashing stuff out for about a week, and he talks to me and he says, would you like to become part of the beta team? And I'll hook you up and you can share things and you can start helping us test stuff. So that's what it was. I proved myself to be a subject matter expert on what I was talking about in a professional way, and they came to me. So that's how it happened for me. I'm not going to claim that that's going to happen the same way for everybody, but that's how it happened for me. I proved myself as a subject matter expert, and Dovetail Games came to me like, yeah, you've got some knowledge that we definitely could benefit with. Come join us and test some stuff with us, and we might be able to make this work. So I hope that's a good answer to your question, Steve. Anyway, the final part of tonight's stream, the Kings and Queens scenario. I'm very, very fond of this scenario, and it's gotten a bit of flack. So I'm hoping to clear some things up with this scenario and with this particular territory in general. Alright, so the scenario spawns us in Atlantic Terminal in Brooklyn, right over by Flatbush Avenue. The scenario's changed a lot since we first got to test it. Not going to go into details, but it's a lot different than it used to be at its inception. It's a pretty cool scenario, though. I like it. So basically, the premise of the scenario is you're operating a train from Atlantic Terminal down the Atlantic Branch, but there's track work being done past Jamaica. So because of that, the service is just terminating at Jamaica, and then you're going to be turning back from Jamaica back to Atlantic Terminal. That's it. And it's a believable story. Track work happens all the time. They close down areas of track all the time. Typically not a entire portion of a branch, but because Dovetail Games only made the Atlantic branch from Atlantic Terminal to Jamaica and didn't extend it all the way down to Locust Manor, etc., they sold that story, and it's a pretty believable story. Track work is always a believable story. Alright, so we're boarding passengers right now. We've got everything set up on this train ready to go. We're in Atlantic Terminal, gonna head east to Jamaica. So, Wireless Osprey brought up something. It's kind of a sensitive topic. He said he wishes that they would expand the beta team even more. He respects that Dovetail Games wants folks that are knowledgeable, but these releases, he's talking about the Long Island Railroad and other releases, just coming with awful bugs a lot of the time as well. So the thing is, It's a matter of manpower when it comes to Dovetail games. We can report everything that we see. We did. We reported all this stuff. The Dovetail Games team isn't big enough and doesn't have the time available to fix every single thing before the release of a root. And that's all I can say about that. But I completely respect the Dovetail Games team for what they were able to fix before the release of this root. They blew my mind a few times. Alright, so this section did get some criticism. This section is 5 miles per hour. Some people were saying when the root got released, no, Atlantic Terminal isn't 5 miles an hour, it's a bug. I'm restricted to 5 miles an hour in Atlantic. No, that's the way it is. Granted, I personally think it's a little bit slow. Yeah, it's slow. 5 miles an hour is slow, and you're going to be going at this for a few minutes before you're able to accelerate to 45. But that's the way it is. So, yeah, we're just continuing at 5. All the way until the east limits of Brook 1 interlocking. Brook is split up into 2 sections, Brook 1 and Brook 2. We're in Brook 1 right now. Alright, so as we just cruise along, let me look at the chat again. Shukal says they had problems with leaks, though. Yeah, there have been a couple instances of leaks beforehand. I know somebody brought up, I think it was like a week before the release of the root, they said, oh, somebody on the inside gave me advance notice that Long Island Railroad is going to be released or something. Yeah, it's concerning. At the time, I took it with a grain of salt because the route had already been officially released, well, not released, but announced at that point by Dovetail Games. The public knew that that was going to be the next route. So somebody saying, oh, somebody on the beta team told me that the next route is going to be Long Island Railroad. Can you really take that too seriously? It's already been officially announced that it's going to be the next route. You know that there's a beta team that tests things privately in advance. Anybody could just start lying and say, hey, somebody on the beta team said that this is going to be the next route, and they told me weeks ago. Anybody could just open their mouth and say that just to start stirring up some shit. So I took it with a grain of salt, but I can understand it being taken a lot more seriously than that, considering that there were legal ramifications associated with sharing things in advance, or sharing things at all. Alright, so my train is about to clear Brook 1 interlocking. You can see the signal for it right there. Once the end of the train clears that, I'll be able to go 45, but only if the cab signals allow me to. So right now I'm still limited to 15 in the cabs. I'm allowed to go 45 per line speed, but the cabs are limiting me to 15, so the lower speed applies. And that's fine. I mean, the next signal ahead is a clear signal, green over red. And that's it. Brook 2 interlocking. So you approach the next signal at 15 and see what happens. I know that a clear signal in this territory is going to upgrade the cabs accordingly and allow me to go line speed. So they just got upgraded to 60. Per the rules, I'm not allowed to increase my speed until the train has run its length. So until the end of the train clears that signal that just gave me the upgrade to 60 on the cabs, where it just did, now I'm able to increase my speed to 45. See how it's all working? You can't just start increasing your speed once the cabs upgrade. So another thing people have brought up is the track speed is 45, like in this particular area. Why do the cabs show 60? Like right now, you can see on the heads-up display that my speed limit is 45. Why is the cab signal 60? And a lot of people have trouble understanding that. I'll explain it once we get up to Nostrand Avenue. Alright, so the reason is the cab signal indicator is not indicative of line speeds. It doesn't know the track speed limit. Like right now, my track speed limit is 30. Cabs don't know that. The cabs are still showing 60. It's just like automatic train control in the Northeast Corridor. Automatic train control just enforces signal speeds. It doesn't enforce track speeds. That's what positive train control is for. And in the Northeast Corridor route, that was done through Advanced Civil Speed Enforcement System, or ACCESS. You'll see that in the cab as ACSES. ACCESS is the same system. Okay, let me stand up and look behind me. It's the same system that's going to start being used on Long Island Railroad starting January 1st, 2019. They've already been installing all of the equipment and stuff on the trains and in the track to prepare to use ACCESS. Now you'll notice that the ACCESS toggle on the rear wall isn't able to be used. It's because it's not cut in yet in real life. It wasn't designed in the train simulator because it's not even in use yet in real life. I didn't realize I threw my brakes into emergency there, I'm sorry. Just gotta throw them into max brake again and then charge them. Anyway, it's ACCESS, the positive train control, that will enforce the actual track speeds. So this area of track is 45 miles an hour. You see that the cab signal indicator is displaying 60. That's not 45. It's way higher. It's 15 miles an hour higher. Theoretically, right now, I could go 60 miles an hour and not be penalized at all, even though track speed is 45. That's what positive train control is going to fix. Positive train control will enforce 45, and it will show up as 45, not only on the cab signal indicator right there, the lamp, but it will also show up as the track speed number right there. Those numerals will be illuminated. So who knows, maybe Dovetail Games will release an update when access is cut in on the Long Island Railroad. Who knows? They definitely already made the aspect display unit. This is the new aspect display unit that's being installed on all the trains that are going to be using access. It's nice in this scenario you see a fair bit of AI traffic. That's been another common complaint, that there's not nearly enough AI traffic in the route. I'll agree, the route does look fairly dead. That's been the biggest complaint thus far. So we're coming up to East New York, and there are some pretty critical signal and speed limit things here that still have me a little bit pissed. And I will point them out to you. They do take place after the station, so we'll make the station stop and then I'll talk about them. Well, so Shukel brings up, no, my previous point I talked about before we dive into the tunnel, dove into the tunnel, mind my grammar please, when I mentioned that there's a decent amount of AI traffic in this route, in this scenario particularly, and he said, yeah, with few trains and no car traffic. So yeah, the car traffic. Right now, it's hard to explain. Unless I just use one word, frame rate. There should be an option in the graphics options to enable like dynamic traffic, whether it be cars or people walking around. There should be some kind of toggle for that, for really high-end systems that can handle those additional dynamic assets. Most computers probably would experience a massive frame rate dip if those things had been implemented. Alright, so another thing is the speed limit here. The heads-up display shows the speed limit here as being 45 miles an hour. This section of track, the entire interlocking, which we're now in East New York interlocking, is 60 miles per hour. This is not 45 mile an hour track. This is 60 miles per hour. Once we reach the east limits of the interlocking, and I'll point that out up here, you'll see it at the signals down here. You can already see the outline of the signal at the east limits. Once you clear that signal right there at the east limits of East New York interlocking, the speed should upgrade to from 60 to 70. I'm going to accelerate as if that's the case. Obviously, once I hit 60 right here, ATC is going to throw a fit if I go any higher. But this, you should be getting up to speeds a lot faster. You should already be allowed to go 70 here. You shouldn't still be limited to 45, just so you know. But I'll wait. The cabs will get upgraded to 70 eventually. I think at that next invisible signal. And that's another thing to bring up. All of the signals between East New York and the next interlocking a few miles ahead is cab signal territory. All the signals down here in this tunnel are those invisible signals that I keep talking about. You're going to see these signals come up in the top right. Oops, I got a little ahead of myself and accelerated past 70. Anyway, you're going to keep seeing these signals pop up in the top right, but you're not going to see any signals on the wayside. You'll be like, where are these signals? I don't see them at all. They're those invisible cab signals, those code change points that I keep mentioning. And they play a huge role when you're about to exit the other side of the tunnel as you approach Jamaica. So a couple of people have been asking. So Steve J asks, will there eventually be DE or DM? Do not know. Hasn't been confirmed. And even if it was confirmed privately, I couldn't reveal it. Acela 1 Alpha says, has the issue pointing out on some stations where the passengers aren't leaving or entering the M7 being addressed? I don't know yet. So the next interlocking up ahead is Dunton interlocking, and when you hit the west limits of Dunton interlocking, the speed limit drops to 45. So right now we're in a 70-mile-an-hour area. Coming up ahead is going to be a 45. The cab signals, those invisible signals, will downgrade the cab signal unit to 45 before we reach Dunton. In real life, that should happen. In the route, that's not happening. So I'm going to simulate it here. I'm going to simulate that cab signal code change point just drops me down to 40. Or 45. And look, now we're coming out of the tunnel. There's 2 points before you exit the tunnel that will start... Excuse me. Sorry, I've been having some throat problems lately. Cold weather, I think. Anyway, there's a couple points before you exit the tunnel that will decrease your speed to 45 beforehand. So... that's the first problem right there. The signal right there shouldn't have been a clear signal at Dunton. It should have been approach medium. So I'm going to start slowing down to medium speed. That signal right that we see right there, approach medium, should have been back there. This one should be approach slow. Approach slow, as I pointed out a few times tonight, means proceed approaching the next signal at slow speed. And if you're going faster than 30, start slowing down to 30. When you hit this next signal at J interlocking, you should not be going any more than 15, even though the game allows you to go a lot faster. It's ridiculous how fast they'll allow you to go past that signal. And that signal type isn't even supposed to be up here. That signal right there with the flashing on the bottom, that's medium approach. That signal is not supposed to be here. That signal only shows up between Harold Interlocking and New York Penn Station. That signal should not even show its face up here. That signal should be slow approach. Slow approach, like I described before, means proceed prepared to stop at the next signal. Slow speed within interlocking limits. And this interlocking should be 15 miles an hour. So right now, when I pass that last signal, I should have gotten 15 on the cabs, which I just got now, for seemingly no reason. I should have gotten it way back there. So that's another thing. If you had watched the Dovetail Games live stream the day that this was released, you would have seen that Luke, when he was operating the train, went blasting into J interlocking, right over there to the left. He came blasting into this interlocking at around 30 miles an hour, and the only reason he did that was because he hadn't practiced this route at all, and was just following the speedometer, and it said 35. So he came blasting in here. He didn't know what the signals meant. I don't blame him. He didn't practice it at all. But you should be going 15 in this part of the interlocking. Alright, so now, in this part of the scenario, the passengers get unloaded at Jamaica, and then you reverse ends. So, to prepare for that, I'm going to prepare the train to switch ends. So it's going to have me turn off all the controls in this area, turn off the headlights, turn on the marker lights, stuff like that. I'll tell you, when you got more than a couple trains here in Jamaica, even if you have a powerful computer, the frame rate is going to suffer. Like right now, we got my static train, that static AI train, and that moving AI train, along with a bunch of passengers walking around. You got all these reflections. Yeah, this is the part of the reason why they're not adding more dynamic assets like vehicles or more passengers on the platform, because the frame rate would plummet and people would complain even more. So I hope that kind of puts it into perspective for you guys. Alright, so let's set this cab up. Could have swore I'd turned the headlights on. Alright, so for the second half of the scenario, you're meant to take the train from Jamaica back to Atlantic Terminal. And there are some signal issues with this section as well. Not as many as in the previous section, but still some issues. Alright, so the signal that we're receiving at J is a slow clear. Slow clear just means proceed at slow speed within interlocking limits. And that there's not going to be a stop signal ahead. It's nice, we got a moving train coming into Jamaica from the Penn tracks up there. So I didn't do it before, but you're supposed to sound your whistle when you go under this bridge. So the cabs just got upgraded to 60. Gotta wait for the entire train to clear before we can proceed to 60. And even then, it's not 60. The speed limit here is not 60. It's 45. So that's like I said before, that's a thing that people have confused. They think that the speed displayed on the cab signal indicator is indicative of the speed they're allowed to go, and that's not the case right now. You still need to know your speed limits and follow the lesser of the two. The more restrictive speed always applies. Alright, so I'm good to go up to 45 now. About to go into the tunnel so I can turn the wipers off. Alright, so now we're fully in the tunnel, so maximum authorized speed is 70. The cabs are still at 60, so now they're just bumped up to 70. So I'll get from 60 to 70 in the time it takes the train to clear. So I'm good to get up to 70. And we're going to hold that speed for a little while. It's only until we get up to East New York where we have to go a lower speed. I'm actually going to do this section without the heads-up display. Alright? Now this is something it's going to take some time for people to get used to. You got to memorize the speed limits, and realize that not all the speed limits in the game are correct yet, especially in the section coming up, approaching East New York. But you got to be comfortable with the speed limits. You got to be comfortable with your cab signal indicator. You got to be somewhat familiar with how the cab signals are supposed to downgrade in real life before you can fully appreciate operating without the heads-up display. I feel I'm at that point. This section's pretty monotonous. It's pretty much all the same kind of tunnel section. They're missing a couple of details, like a couple of abandoned stations down here in the tunnels. But for the most part, this is pretty much what it looks like down there. Alright, so once you hit the curve around here, you're going to want to start slowing down from 70 down to 60, because once you hit the east limits of East New York interlocking, you're going to be thrown down into 60. And you just saw the cabs bump down to 60 there, which was pretty cool. They did their job there, which is nice. Even though it's not 60 miles an hour here yet in real life, close. But even though it's not here yet, it prepares you for it. Right at that signal is where it's supposed to bump down to 60. And then we're going to get up into the station. So I'm going to start braking for the station stop. Nice stop. I'm going to keep the heads-up display off in between station stops. We've only got 2 more stops. So the maximum authorized speed here is 45. The cabs show 60. Lowest applies. That's why it's so important that you know your speed limits. So we're getting pretty close to Nostrand Avenue. Afterward, between Nostrand Avenue and Atlantic Terminal is when it gets pretty interesting. Pretty interesting speed limit changes. Then you got that 5-mile-an-hour limit into Atlantic Terminal, again, that you gotta watch out for. Alright guys, so we're in the home stretch. Nostrand Avenue to Atlantic Terminal. Once I get into the tunnel, I'm going to turn off the windshield wipers, and then I'll turn off the heads-up display, and we'll be going strictly on route knowledge and cab signals to the end of the route. Alright? And I'll be explaining it on the way in. Alright, so we're getting close to Brook 2. So we're gonna slow down to 40 right here. In real life, we would have gotten an approach medium indication right here, which would have enforced 40. But in game, it's still enforcing 60, so I'm gonna do what real life would dictate. So now we're at the east limits of Brook 2, still at 40. And now we're at the west limits of Brook 2, which is going to take us down to 30 in real life. In the game, it takes us down to 40. So see, there's a lot of differences between the signaling in real life and in the game. So now I'm going to start slowing down to 5. The next signal is a restricting signal. Even though it's malformed in the game, I know in real life it's supposed to display a restricting aspect, and it's restricted speed not exceeding 5 miles per hour. That's not a proper signal right there. Yellow over 2 white, that's not a real thing, guys. So ignore that. Just know that from this point on, you should be going 5. So as we're cruising along, Charles Helfrich says, will there be any more scenarios for Long Island Railroad? I don't know of any plans for any more scenarios. The only more scenarios for Long Island Railroad that I imagine will happen is when the editor comes out and you guys make scenarios. Another signal that's supposed to be displaying restricting. Again, malformed aspect. Just know that it means to display restricting. Alright, so as we're coming into Atlantic Terminal, I hope that tonight's session was a little bit revealing as to how things unfolded with this route, how the signaling was designed in this route, how the signaling is supposed to work in this route, and ultimately how Dovetail Games can fix it. I know I'm going to have to put it into writing and include a lot of photos and stuff to make it more clear, but I'm hoping that this video, accompanied with my verbal explanation, was able to make things a little bit more clear for you guys with regards to the signaling used on the Long Island Railroad. Given that this is only the night of Thanksgiving and I have the next... Christ, I got tomorrow off, I got Saturday off, I got Sunday off, and I got Monday off, I don't see why I can't do more live streams this weekend. So if you guys have any specific questions that you want me to answer in a future live stream, anything you want me to demonstrate in a future live stream, just hit me up, and I very well may include it in a live stream this weekend, because I got plenty of time and I want to help you guys out. There's been a lot of complaints with regards to the Long Island Railroad route for Train Sim World. A lot of misconceptions, a lot of confusion regarding the signaling and the speed limits and how to interpret things. I want to alleviate a lot of that confusion. So please let me know if this wasn't enough, what I can do more to help you guys understand. Alright? My primary goal is not only for this to be an accurate simulator, but for you guys to have the knowledge to enjoy it fully. And even if it's not a perfect simulator, I want to give you guys the knowledge to enjoy it as if it was a perfect simulator. You know what I mean? You can compensate in many ways. And that's it, guys. Have a good night. Happy Thanksgiving.